Hi, everybody, and welcome to our weekly Wednesday live coaching session. And we're joined today with our wonderful global ambassadors who are just all in, which I love. So thank you so much for being here with us. And we're all here to have this conversation to encourage other people to have uncomfortable conversations and explore into how we're showing up, explore into the pieces of ourselves that we're trying not to look at, because it's really important for the Backyard Peace Project, to build world peace, is to build peace within ourselves first. And that means looking at all aspects of ourselves. It means having the courage to lean in to things that are uncomfortable. So that is the purpose of having these conversations every week. And every week I never tell my brilliant team what we're talking about, because I want the answers to be really authentic. I want the responses to be raw and honest. And so they don't have any prep time. So it's my little guilty pleasure. So thanks everybody for being here. And I'm just going to launch straight in as always. And I'm going to tell you that the last couple of weeks, my heart's been quite heavy. So I've been watching what's going on in the world. I've been observing, and not just what's been happening in the world, but observing people's responses to what's been happening in the world. And that has sometimes caught me a little bit off guard, because it's revealed things about people that I hadn't been aware of, that possibly they hadn't shown me previously, because they hadn't had the opportunity to show that side of them. And I had to sit with that for quite a long time. And I was thinking last night about this call and thinking, how am I going to approach this? And what is it? What is the process that I've been through here? Why have I found this so complex and challenging? That's been my main theme over the last couple of weeks. Why am I finding this so complex and challenging? And I came to the conclusion yesterday that I internally, with my thoughts and my feelings, didn't respond to these situations like I thought I would. And that really made me question myself and question, where is this coming from? Is this valid? Is this unreasonable or reasonable? And sort of having that long pause to sort of feel into, where am I right now? And why do I feel like this? And is this response okay? Or is this response need looking at? Do I need to do more work on myself? And the conclusion that I came to, I will tell you at the end. But I really would love to discuss with you first on what you feel, because we've been witnessing big things globally right now. And feeling, I've certainly felt the heaviness of that, being an empath. And I tend not to go down the rabbit hole in that sense, because I need to keep myself fairly high vibe and high beat and upbeat and doing all the projects that I'm doing. But I felt like this needed my attention and I didn't want to look away. And so my question to you guys is, how have you been going the last couple of weeks? I don't want you to reveal anything, obviously, that you don't feel comfortable with, but leaning into our responses to big events and also observing other people's responses and how that's affected us. Jennifer?
Yeah, everyone's gone quiet. It's very complex, and I think I say that all the time. But this is, and the world is a really heavy place right now. I've actually been off socials and not listened to, haven't had the television on, haven't listened to the news purposely, because it is such a heavy place. And the conversations I've had with people over the last couple of weeks, there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of questioning, just why is this happening? And people grasping for answers but not getting any, and that's frustrating them more. And so I have backed right away from socials, because I personally can't deal with it, because it brings me down. And I've had a lot going on in my personal life that, like, no, I don't need this outside stuff, because I'm struggling with my own stuff at the moment. So it's all been this heaviness and this just more questions than answers is what I'm getting from people.
Mm.
And the same with me, like, with stuff they've been telling me and what I've been hearing. It's just constant why. And it's global. It's not just us here in our own backyards. It's out there everywhere in the wider community. So I don't know how to deal with it. It's like, and I've been talking to people as young as 16 through to people my own age, and it's across the board. So I really don't have an answer for you. This is just what's going on with me and my life, and I don't know what the answer is. I just find I've had to withdraw and just no socials, no television, no listening to any of it, and just focus on me and my corner of the world. And hopefully conversations will get better and will lift and lighten in weeks to come. So, yeah, that's just where I'm at.
And I think that's really valid, Jennifer. I really do, because there are times when, you need to preserve self first in order to function, in order to serve, and in order to be healthy. And I haven't watched the news for 15 years. So I am one of those people that I'm very protective of my energy. So I think the point that you raise is very valid. And I think people should really listen to that and detox as much as they can. And it's interesting because yesterday I was at my local butcher's. He's a lovely guy, and he's Canadian. And it was so interesting because we chat every time I go in there. It's a family-owned business. And we were teetering on the edge of some of the current issues. And it was so interesting because we were both really careful about how we were approaching the conversation. I could see he was being very thoughtful in the words he was choosing. I was being very thoughtful in the words I was choosing. And we had
Everyone's walking on eggshells.
Well, but I feel like it wasn't eggshells as such as we were just like testing the temperature out with each other. We were trying to have this difficult conversation respectfully. He made a few points, I made a few points, but I came away feeling hopeful that we could have, considering we're not besties, we're not, he's my butcher, he's a lovely guy, but we're not friends. But for us to be able to have that level of conversation and part positively and both have respect for testing out how each other were responding. So that made me feel lighter.
Yeah, absolutely. And it does. And I guess like when I have conversations with you and like-minded people, the conversations are lighter. But when I have conversations with others, it's heavier. So, yeah, I probably didn't say that right, but, yeah, I understand what you're saying with that. Yeah. And there is hope. There is hope out there. There's just layers above it and layers below it. And it's sifting your way, making your way through all those layers. That's the hard part. And keeping the hope there. Yeah.
And I think that's the challenge, right? It's especially when you're doing the work you're doing, the hope is you don't see the finish line pretty much any time. You see it every now and then, but then your hope is that you can keep working because you believe in it so much. And I think that's probably the big thing. And in what you're saying there, Jen, is it's about people are asking why. And I sort of see that in a bigger picture and go, that's great. Because otherwise, what have we been doing for the last 100-odd years? We've buried our heads with all this stuff. And the why gets the answers out. And the more people that ask why, the more this stuff's going to come out, which is what I see of this. And I don't watch the news or any of that. And I see some stuff on socials only because it gets thrown at you, but I flick straight through, go on to some other funny thing that's cats farting or something. I don't know. So, but it's the importance behind it if we look at a global perspective, like with any major shakeup, it creates an opportunity for growth. Like, as we all know, everything we talk about is a catalyst for growth, and all the challenges and traumas and things we've ever been through. Yet it's not in our own backyard anymore. It's the world is our backyard, and we see it everywhere, and everybody's affected. Like you, Cass, I feel everything, and some days it's too much. I remember as a kid that I used to feel the pain of the world, and it was way too much to even understand, and I don't think I ever will. And I think it's the challenge of trying to make perspective or make sense of anything that doesn't make sense. And so how I sort of try to navigate that is to try and keep in my lane as much as I can. Like, there's things that you see out there that if you are driven to do that and you have the skills to do that, then you do something about it. If your skill set and your ideas in your life is in a different trajectory, it's not to be ignorant of it. It's just to be here for what you're here for. If I was here to do something about it and to feel about it or listen to people's conversations around that, then that's what I'm here for. But I find when there's moments of, and this is only through, I guess, years of learning and trialing and messing it up and trying to work it out through my own emotions and life, that when I can bring myself into a neutral space and give myself that understanding that I'm here for something different than to deal with that stuff, then allows me to step aside and see a bigger picture. It's not that I don't care about the people and everything that's happening to the world and what's happening. And that's quite the opposite. I'm here for all of it. And I feel that to put my energy into that and to get into the emotion of it completely is quite a challenge. Yet I have a lot of things going on that I need to have my energy in. And I need to keep my energy on that as opposed to what happened around the corner, where there's conspiracies and politicals and religions and all of the things that create opportunity for a shake-up. And I see that there's so much getting put out there now because of social media, and there is no filters except for some people get blocked when they actually try to give the truth. Then it's to look at what's being shown and, I guess, get an understanding and a clarity that the opposite is also true in some form. Yet what we're being shown is that's what you've been shown. We don't see all of it. And that's the challenge, because again, like, you're doing your best to be the best human in the world, but there's so much deceit happening in the puppeteering of what's going on in the world. And so how do we navigate that? How do we adjust that? And I think doing what we're doing and doing our best to work with people to help them find their space and their truth. And then the questions will expand on that into a space of understanding that you're not meant to understand it. Otherwise, we would have known it years ago. Yet the whistleblowers will come out and it will be clearer if we just focus on what we're here for and do our best to look after each other. Is my little rant.
It's a very gentle rant. Yeah, I feel like as well, what concerns me and what I fully understand simultaneously is the shutting down of conversations. And I understand why. Being a trauma specialist, I understand why people will shut down conversations and walk away from it, because there's too much there to unpack. They haven't got the emotional capacity at that moment. They haven't got the bandwidth, etc. I get it. I totally get it. And it comes back to that self-preservation piece that Jen was talking about. Like, we need to look after ourselves 100%. But it's also concerning that, like, for example, I had a situation, and that really quite shocked me, that I had a contact, not exactly friends, but we've been contacts for many, many years. And we have navigated through different things together. But on one particular issue, when we were trying to discuss it, this person who is the head of a media outlet completely shut me down, like removed me from all of the platforms. And I was so respectful and gentle in the conversation. And I was like, wow, that is really quite, number one, surprising. I was very surprised because I've always held this person in, you know, high, I've always revered this person and really respected and honored them and thought they were fantastic. And so that really surprised me, that as we were just very, very gently and respectfully having an uncomfortable conversation, because my perspective wasn't matching their perspective, they just bolted. But then what concerned me was like, you're the head of quite a big media. You're not open to having this conversation. That's concerning, because you're basically being the algorithm that's only feeding one perspective, you know, on the issue. And that concerns me a little bit, because what's my truth isn't going to ring true with somebody else's truth. But if we can talk about it, surely we can find some threads of commonality to understand each other to a deeper level and move forward together, working collectively for a future, rather than this polarization that we're seeing at the moment.
I think it comes, the algorithm is real, right? Like, it is so real. My kids woke up to, you know, to the shooting the other day, and it's never crossed my algorithm. It's never come up yet. All of my children saw it, and my children are older, obviously, but they all saw it within minutes of waking up that morning. I'm like, wow, our algorithms are so different. And not just for the funny things that I see on TikTok, right? Their funny things are different to my funny things, or so I'm told. But that what we get from that space, and I think COVID taught us this a lot, in that we will only hear often what we're looking for. And my mum goes down lots of big rabbit holes, right? Like, the stuff that's on her algorithm is, you know, deep hole stuff. But I think the problem with these conversations, if we are applying judgment at any point, then we are never going to have an honest and open discussion. And if any one party is applying judgment, then we're never going to get there. And it's almost not worth having the conversation for me, right? Because my job is not to change someone's mind. My job is, if we're having a conversation, is only ever to express my perspective, knowing that there will always be other sides to that. But when somebody comes from judgment, and they come from judgment because they perceive that their opinion or their space in the world is righteous or the right way, and that ultimately, in my opinion, comes from a lack of self-awareness and self-confidence, right? And or trauma that's still sitting in the system that says this is the path, and there can only be one right way. But it's the judgment piece, I think, that stops there being a fully open and collaborative conversation that can actually go anywhere. So I'll avoid these conversations like the plague. But it didn't. I went into a workplace the other day, and all of these mature women were talking about what they had seen on their Instagram. So it had obviously come up on theirs as well, and there was no filter and no warning, and all the other pieces weren't there, and they had been distressed by it. Some of them not sleeping, all the things. I went home to my kids and I was like, just checking in, how did that land for you guys? Like, are you all okay? Because I haven't seen it, but I know you all have. Are you okay? And they were like, yeah, it's fine. It was gruesome to watch and hard to see, but we're okay. I'm like, okay, so there's the difference between, you know, the rest of their world, I guess, and what these women were experiencing, having seen those things. Otherwise, I'm like Jen, and just don't. It's not on my algorithm. Thankfully I don't see anything political other than birth stuff. That's the algorithm I've got, right? So I see all the stuff around birth trauma, but I don't see anything else particularly. But I do that to protect myself and my space and my environment. It's important, right? But yeah, I think it's the judgment piece is what I really wanted to say, just in a long-winded way.
Do you think with the like with the difference between older adults and then the teens and 20s and younger, is there like a what's the word for it? They've been
Desensitization.
desensitized and normalized that killing and shooting, because
Their games.
all the games are designed, like trying to find games for my kids, like 8-year-old, that hasn't got shooting or killing or some form in it. I was like, he wants to play video games. Like, good. But everything doesn't have to be about killing. Does that desensitize them to then, when the reality hits in and seeing it on the news, that then it's like, oh, well, that's normal. Like seeing someone getting stabbed on TV or something. It's terrible.
Scientifically, we know it does. That's what the research shows, is that it does desensitize. However, I have 4 daughters, none of whom played, shoot 'em up games. It wasn't what they did. And so I don't think there's a desensitization for them necessarily. I think they spoke very eloquently about their ideas around it, in that it's no way for anyone to go. They showed compassion for the fact that his wife and children were present. They said, despite his opinions, nobody, like, that should never have happened, and they had compassion for that. But they weren't traumatized by it. It didn't cause them to feel, and they had discussions around his politics and all of those sorts of things. But it wasn't distressing for them, in that it was something, and it just, for them, the poignant moment was the fact that he was talking about everybody should be able to have guns at the point at which he was then shot, and they were like, that's got to make you think, right? Like, so there may be, there 100% is a desensitization that has happened out there. It wasn't present, I don't believe, for my children in that moment. So there are some young adults who won't have that same, but will have a different analysis, I guess, based on the security in their home or how secure they feel in the world. And I like to think my children feel safe and secure. Although when we lost power last night and everything went black, I was told to come to the 15-year-old's room to rescue her from the boogeyman who might be in the cupboard. Quick, lights are gone out. But yeah, so I think there's a bit of both potentially.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's bringing up your children with being able to think broadly without just numbing and just, like, it's not just the games, but there's movies and media and all sorts of stuff, but it's like being able to share with them your thoughts and your ideas and being that example. I think that's brilliant, and that's the future. Because the reality is it's going to happen. It's like, how do we react with that? How do our children flow on from that and expand on those conversations into a degree where there's compassion, peace, and understanding? That's brilliant.
I think there's certainly a level of desensitization happening globally in general, no matter if you play those games or not, because we are so exposed to so many things on so many different channels that we just have to also learn to compartmentalize. Like I thought of that when Philippa, when you said, something like that doesn't even come across my algorithm, and I'm like, why did it show up on my channel? Is it because I deal with death and loss and grief? Maybe that's why, I don't know. But for me, it was the first thing that I saw, and luckily, I don't even know if that's lucky or not, but I was glad that at least in my case, the video was blurred. Then somebody posted in a lot of detail after I said, I'm glad it was blurred. He explained exactly what he saw, and where it wasn't blurred. I'm like, I just said, I'm glad I didn't see it. And now you're explaining it to me. It's not really what I asked for. But I think I want to put a positive twist on that as well, because the thing is, if we go back like 50, 100 years even, where we didn't have any of those social media or all these channels where we get bombarded with news every day, where we kind of have to desensitize a little bit, because otherwise where would we end up? You know, we'd all go insane with way too much empathy or taking things on board that are not ours to carry. And I think that's where we need to draw the line as well and be very careful, like what part of that is ours to carry? Where does our responsibility lie when we see things like that? And I literally took a stand in my video about that, saying nothing political whatsoever. I did not take a political stand. I did not say pro or con him or what he stood for. It was the fact that his wife and his 3-year-old son and 1-year-old daughter, or the other way around, I think 3-year-old daughter, 1-year-old son, doesn't matter, had to watch it, had to witness it live. And then what makes it okay to post it all over social medias, and other women get flagged because they had a video of them breastfeeding? I mean, where can this be right? And that's all I said. And now my Insta account is gone, and now I'm flagged on Facebook groups and I can't post anymore. It is just really unbelievable, where I'm thinking all of this was about, where's the freedom of speech? You know, when you can't say anything without being shot, when you can't say anything without losing all your access. There is no freedom of speech in any of that. And that, to me, that fact is the most concerning of all of that. That we can't actually say what we stand for without being shot, flagged, shot down in whatever way. I know that's a broad spectrum that I'm putting out there. And when we get to the point where, you know, things like that happen in front of the entire family, and there's no one size fits all in the way that social media approaches that. It's such a bizarre thing. You know, we talked about that just before we came live, you know, the community standards. It's so generic. And how can it even still be monitored with the amount of posts of billions of people going out there every single day? That is concerning to me. Am I frozen now?
Yeah, you're good. But it's also about, I mean, building on your point, something that I've struggled with as well is, you know, you see some of the, I call them celebrities, I suppose, on the red carpet, wherever they are at whatever event, wearing pretty much nothing. Like, there's been some outfits that have been pretty, like, very minimum, to say the least.
Yeah.
And that's okay, but breastfeeding mothers isn't okay. Do you know what I mean? And you're like, yeah, there's, but one thing that Paul touched on that I was actually speaking to with my butcher, because we have deep philosophical conversations. And I was saying to him, I think everything's breaking down so we can rebuild together. I said, I feel like this is leading somewhere really positive. And he said, oh, that actually, thank you so much for saying that, because he said, I feel lighter for that. And I said, it has to. Like, I just feel like there's so much being dismantled right now, to build a solid foundation for us to come together. Because what I have loved is my feed has been filling up with a lot of people saying we need to unite. We need to find the threads of commonality. We need to connect. We need to connect through love. We need to, you know, all of those things. And that's fantastic, you know, and there are a lot of stories coming out with the powers that be are trying to divide and rule. Yeah. And there's a lot of people waking up and going, no, we're not going to be manipulated like this. We are going to be critical thinkers. We're going to be independent thinkers, and we are going to forge our own path ahead. And I feel like it's going to, the top end is going to crumble because the bottom end is going to unite and build upwards. Because people are starting to question things, like you were saying, Paul and Jennifer, why? They're starting to ask questions. They're starting to wake up. They're starting to demand more. They're starting to want more transparency with communication and policy. And they're questioning why not all of the information's been released. Why has it been manipulated in this way? And for decades, those powers have got away with it. And now people are going, no, we don't want this anymore. We deserve more. We deserve more transparency. We deserve to be led from somebody who wants to unite us. you know, and I feel very strongly about that. And I've seen some excellent leaders coming up through the ranks who have that agenda, which is very encouraging.
I like that, Paul. I think you were the one who brought that in, you know, the question of we need to ask the question why, so we can get to the bottom of this, or that, you know, things will be shaken up a little bit more. It was really interesting to watch my reaction while I was listening to Jennifer and you talking about that, and now you, Cathy, because in my line of work, I usually come from the opposite, where I work with a lot of widows predominantly that constantly ask themselves the question, why did he die? Why did this happen to me? Why? And I usually steer them away from that why and said, we cannot drive ourselves crazy with that question why. We have to look at what can we actually do with that? What can we do with that going forward now? How can we rebuild our lives? But in this case, it's different. And that's why I had to really sit with that, how that lands with me when you guys say we have to ask the question why. I'm like, it's interesting because it's polar opposite of what I was teaching, but it's a different situation. It's not somebody died and it was their time to go, and we sort of hold ourselves back from healing with being stuck in a question why. It's something terrible has happened that could have been prevented, and we do need to ask that question. It's a very different situation. But the one thing where I see the commonality that I find so important is, what do we do with that going forward? That's when you just said, Cathy, about building from the ground up, you know. Now that everything's falling apart in that system and it's starting to crumble, and it's been crumbling for a while, but you know, things have been shaken up quite terribly. What do we do with that? What do we do with the broken pieces? How do we rebuild it? And the beautiful Kintsugi comes to mind every time I talk about broken pieces. You know, we've got the gold. How are we going to put the pieces back together so we can look at something that is really worth living for and living in?
I think it's interesting that I read a book around the differences in generations and how different generations perceive the world and live within it. And it's interesting that Gen Y is literally the generation that asks why. Why do you do it that way? Why are you going to, you know, why do we have to keep doing it that way? Like, can't we do it a different way? And they literally are the generation to question what's happening. And I think the millennials are, you know, and the Gen Zs are like, well, I don't like it, so we're not going to do it that way, right? They're not even asking anymore. They're just assuming they're going to do it their way. And so I think for me, I actually feel very hopeful in our future generations, particularly if we can stop stressing them out with, you know, being too busy and having too much on their plate all the time. I think if we can honor their lack of tradition as actually what could bring the world together, then we will see over the next few generations a very different world. You know, we've had, and you said before, Cathy, you know, it's been decades, it's been centuries of this kind of looking to our to our betters for guidance, you know, whether it be the church or the royalty or whoever it might be. For centuries we have looked to someone else, for our source of information and guidance, instead of being self-directed and living as a community. And as some cultures did this much better, but from a Western perspective, we have for centuries given over our power, so to speak. And so and you know, you follow, if you look at the builders and the boomers and the Gen Xers, I think are just well, I think we're a powerful underutilized generation, because we kind of sit in the middle and go, I can see why you did that, but I can see why they want to do that. Let's go with this, right? But I'm actually really hopeful about what will happen if we just let these young people, if we support them with the wisdom and the knowledge and the love and the guidance, rather than the judgment, and rather than holding them back into what should be what we think or what has always happened, and we let them create the world that they want to bring their children up in. you know, but we're just still so tied to these archaic models of, you know, and the middle-aged white man running everything, which is effectively what most nations in, you know, in the Western world at least still operate under. If we can get out from underneath that stuff, we could actually have a really powerful community supportive space. So I'm hopeful, but I do think it's going to take a couple of generations to really see this stuff start to come through.
Yeah, I think with what you all mentioned is like the way we parent our kids, the next generation, it has to change. We can't use our parents' parenting way to guide the next generation. So like what Philippa has said, is like the Gen Z is like, I don't ask why anymore. I just do what I feel like doing. They don't even ask for your opinion or anything at all nowadays. They just do what they like. And instead of that, I think the way we parent is like, instead of letting them do what they like, we need to ask like what's their opinion and things like that to gather more information from them and guide them along that way. I don't know, you can say the right way, how to move forward. So for my kids, it's like they do play. I mean, I have a young man at home and he plays games. And yes, there is shooting games as well. But when it comes to the real life situation, like what you mentioned, looking at the videos on social media and all those things, I always remind them, this is what people put out. So you don't let that affect you and you don't learn from that. But you always have to do your research and you always have to think in your own way as well. So how does it really affect them? They feel safe, maybe because we are in Singapore, so they feel safe. They don't feel the fear. But at the same time, I always remind them, you have to be aware as well. The situation around you, the people around you, so that you are always be on alert or anything, if anything happens.
I love that you say that. Literally, my parenting course is called Not Your Mother's Parenting Playbook, because we have to do it. And not because it's a judgment on how our mothers did it, but because we have to reinvent it if we want a different outcome. And I think we need to encourage our children to, like, they won't ask why necessarily, but they'll very happily, my children will very happily tell me what they think is wrong with it. And my kids ask for guidance. They'll ask for my opinion. But I think they feel free to do that because they know that I won't judge them for their opinion, and that I will seek only to help inform their opinion, and ask them questions to think on to help them create that. And I think that's for me, I think since perimenopause hit, I've shifted I don't know if everybody goes through this, but I've shifted my thought process has gone from, instead of being the doer necessarily, to being the usher. Does that make sense? So I feel like my job now is to guide rather than to do. And probably not being very articulate today, but yeah, just kind of shifting in that zone to be able to say, okay, what can my wisdom and experience give to the next generation to help inform them of how they can sit in their own power and move forward with confidence and clarity, and in their best space.
I just also want to say, Philippa, what you just said about the course and the parenting, it's not even just that the way our parents did it was so wrong. At least I don't feel that with my parents. I feel in particular my dad has done a really, really great job. I've got a different relationship to my mom, and we're in a very beautiful healing stage, let me put it that way. And I think that it's from generation to generation, it's the same thing, you know, like what my grandparents did with my parents certainly didn't work for them doing that with us. So they changed it, and now we are changing it. I think part of it is that it's completely normal from generation to generation to evolve. But what makes it so much more intense is because everything's just changing so much faster than it used to 2 or 3 generations ago. Now the change is like on a daily basis, to the point where both my sons, and they are 17 and 15 now, tell me like, this is happening too fast. And they grew up in that generation, and they are telling me that everything's happening too fast and changing too fast. And I feel like it is getting trickier by the decade, or by the year, or even by the minute at the moment, to adjust and adopt and adapt. And there's this whole, when you look at the school system, that's like the least evolved of everything. And that's where it should have been the most evolved, to take the lead, because they are teaching our future generations. We are entrusting our children in that. And it's not that we have a big choice other than homeschool. And not everybody has got that, the bandwidth or the capacity or the opportunity to do that. So there's so much going on. Like, I know we started with one topic and now we're going through this whole thing, which I always love when we do that in our conversations. But yeah, it's intense.
I think you're right in some aspects, in that it's not about blame. It's not about saying you did it wrong. It's not about, and I know, as a parent, I have messed up so many times, and never from ill intent. Never. I've always intended to do my very best and to love my children to my best capacity. But I have messed up. There's a difference in a generation of parents who are willing to accept that, and a generation of parents who would deny that. And my mother's generation would deny that, despite the mistakes that they've made. I lean into that and go, how can I repair? But I think the interesting that we talk about the generations changing it all the time, and that is true, but only for the Western world. There are cultures around the world who exist in this current climate with mobile phones and internet and all the things, who parent the same way they have always parented. And they have some of the most cooperative, community-minded children and young adults in the world. And there's a great book called Hunt, Gather, Parent, and she talks about these particular communities, and she went and sat with them to figure out how are they parenting in a way that actually creates this desire for children to seek information from their elders and so on. And if you look at the work of Gabor Mate and Gordon Neufeld, particularly Gordon Neufeld, they talk about this relationship-based parenting, which if we actually take what they're modeling there and we go back 400 years, 500 years, that was how people would have parented even in the Western sort of culture, or European style world. It was far more based on time, relationship, and less about behavior, and more about understanding children and allowing children to have emotions and all those sorts of things, and just be kids, right? There was a lot. It was slower. The problem is we are seeking to change things generation after generation in the Western world, because we are so disconnected from ourselves. We don't even know how to connect in with our children. But there are some cultures out there who actually do it really, really beautifully, even in the modern society. We just need to take a leaf from their book, and it all comes back to parenting based on relationship instead of behavior, which is corporal, which is what we learn in school, right? So the school system definitely comes into that. But the school system comes into the fact that we judge everyone and everything, and there's all the comparison and all the perfection and all of that stuff all comes into the school, and what we pick up during our school culture. Yeah, it's really interesting topic though.
Yeah.
I can go in deeper on that a little bit too, because going back to what you're saying, there's the cultures that where it's working. If you dive into them a little deeper, have a look at how much connection they have with not only each other, but with nature. as nature,
Oh,
as natural.
absolutely.
We're these natural beings that are part of this system. The disconnect just pulls you out of that. You're so confused of what you're actually doing. Like, we're in this huge cycle of shift. We're saying it's what's happening in the media, but it's actually happening planetarily. And we're in between, we go into that astrology side of it. We're in between two eclipses. I was running a class last night, and the lady who I was doing the class with, she's talking about right now, the in between of these two eclipses is the shakeup of everyone's feeling like they're in two different timelines, two different worlds, two different experiences, where some people are seeing all the doom and gloom and some people are seeing the opportunity. But also in between, in your own emotional state, your natural state, your emotions are torn because you're like, oh, which way do I go? What am I doing? Who am I? Where do I fit into any of this? And I guess, as I always say, it's always bringing it back to you. Look at your cycle. Because we're in a cycle of energy, we're in a cycle of excitement, we're in a void cycle, we're in the growth, the frustration, the change cycle. So it's all part of life. So that where we're seeing, and what we started the topic on about the shake-up, we're in this shake-up, which, think of your life, anytime you've had that challenge all the way, there's so much pressure, then oh, everything's cool. I feel great. Oh, I'm inspired. Let's go. And everyone, you start taking this new trajectory. And this is the generations. Each generation has gone through these stages of, oh, my parents did this. I don't want to do that. My parents did this. I don't want to do that. So we're evolving naturally, naturally through our generations, our genes, which is nature. So in the seasons of humans, the humans of life, and life is nature and the planet, we must evolve. There is no other way to do it. And when you drop off a limb off a tree, it grows another one, stronger and better. And so that's where we're at. We're in that place of about to chop off a limb to grow the next level of opportunity. And our children and our children's children from there are that evolution of the seeds that have been planted through our genes. And there we go out into the universe. We can go beyond, but it's if we bring it back to that point of we are baseline natural nature, we get ourselves in tune with that, get our teachings and growth and families and cultures and community within that space, then there is natural flow. There is no need for polarity and restriction and resistance, because you cut the grass, it'll naturally want to grow back up. You don't have to fight for it, it just does it. And so that's where the evolution, building that foundation, Cathy, is like, where do we start with that?
I want to hear what decision you came to, Cathy.
Oh, well, before I tell you that, it's interesting, Philippa, what you were saying, and Paul, with the nature thing is so true. But when I was on a parenting podcast a couple of weeks ago, a friend of mine has a brand in America, and she was interviewing me, and she was talking about all the different parenting styles. And she said, the old way of parenting is, when your parent says, because I said so. And then we were talking about all these things. And I just said, can I just say to the audience, I've 100% said, because I said so. So I said, I've taken all aspects of all different parenting, and it's a big mishmash in my house. I take a little bit from everything to suit the situation, to suit the child, to suit my energy levels. And I said, because I'm raising my children to question everything, it's exhausting because they question everything. And I kind of love it, but I'm kind of like, sometimes like, because I said so. Because I said so like 3 times really nicely. So let's just do it. And so I do feel like we need to give ourselves a break as well of how we're showing up at the best capacity that we can in that moment. But to answer your question, Philippa, and to round this off, the conclusion that I came to. So as I said at the top of the meeting, I've had a very complex couple of weeks because I have been leaning into things that are uncomfortable. I've been looking at people's responses. And I think my challenge, and at first my disappointment, was in how I responded, and not publicly, just within myself, how I felt, how I responded within myself. And then I was thinking about the Backyard Peace Project, and I was thinking about our vision and what we're creating here, and all of the heart and love and all of the work we've put into it. And I came to this conclusion. It's okay not to have a perfect response. It's okay not to be a robot. It's okay not to have ascended to such a level that you don't feel things at a human level. But the piece was, for me, being able to lean in and explore it and come out with some kind of calibrated equilibrium at the end, where we're encompassing it all and showing up and being, hopefully, a bridge between the two sides. So that was my conclusion.
I love that.
So thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We're here every Wednesday. Well, at least, well, I can't even say that I am now, because sometimes people cover for me because I've got things going on. So I appreciate the cover. But thank you so much for being here. Do comment below. Jump into the Backyard Peace Project free Facebook group if you want to be connected with us. We're here, we're building extraordinary things in the background. There's going to be a huge promotion with an amazing deal for you very, very soon. The Backyard Peace Project anthology is now going to be, it's in pre-sale. So we're launching it on World Peace Day on the 25th of September. So please look at our socials, because you'll be able to see we've got 5 authors on this call, part of the Backyard Peace Project anthology, Finding Peace Through Struggle. And some of those stories have never been told. And we touch on some very, very deep topics that I do feel that, with all the complexity that people are navigating through at the moment, I do feel that this is going to be a lifeline for a lot of people, because there's a lot of vulnerability in the book and a lot of strength, hope, and inspiration. So I do hope that you'll pre-order and get your copy hot off the press. So thank you so much for being here, and we shall see you next time.